There are things in this world that are incomprehensible, things that we also find in the Bible, things where you read them like this, and when you look at them, you might think it's impossible. How is that supposed to work humanly? It can't work at all. And yet it does work. But not humanly, it comes from a different source. The true source of strength for a person always comes from God. If a person wants to live powerfully, they need God. He needs the source from which this power comes, so that he gets the strength to live the way he imagines or desires. And we often try to do things on our own and fail again and again. And there is one thing that is very interesting. It made a big impression on me when I read this story. It happened during the American War of Independence. And before we look into this story, we have a very interesting verse that we find in Romans chapter 12, verse 20. The Bible tells us the following: if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. Isn't that a bit steep, what God is asking here? Well, if we have this image that we know on this earth, people, if you have an enemy, it's actually asking a lot if you greet him at all. But you should give him food and drink. So that's quite a steep challenge that God is offering us here. But friends, God asks nothing of us that is not possible, and nothing that he wouldn't want to give us. And that is exactly the point. That is what the Bible calls sanctification. This is what we must learn in order to move forward, to become different, to become as Christ was, as Christ lived. And let's take a quick look at his story. Something that happened during the American War of Independence. There was a pastor there called Miller, and this pastor had a neighbor. The neighbor didn't like him. The neighbor. Suddenly, one day, government officials came and arrested the neighbor. Miller was arrested a few days later. He was sentenced to death for treason. When Miller heard this, he set off on foot 60 miles to General Washington. At that time, he was still a general. Later, he was the President of the United States. And Miller sets off and walks 60 miles. He had no other option. And when he gets there, to General Washington's office, he sits down and makes his case. And General Washington listens to it, and then all of a sudden he asks a question and says, "Mr. Miller, did you really walk 60 miles to free your friend, your neighbor, to get a pardon for him? I have to tell you, there is nothing I can do. Treason is treason. I appreciate your commitment, but there's nothing I can do." At that moment, Miller says, "No, Mr. Washington, he's not my friend, he's my enemy." And Washington looks at him all puzzled, like, "Your enemy? He's my enemy. He's hated me all my life. He's only done bad things to me, only wished me ill. But why have you come? It doesn't matter. I've always liked him." When Washington hears it, he signs the petition for clemency, puts it in Miller's hand, and says his execution will be tonight. There and there you run fast. If you get there fast, get there in time, hand in my petition for clemency, hand in my signature there, and it'll be all right. And Miller sets off and runs 20 miles. That's a good 20 miles and running what the stuff holds, and still arrives in time. The crowds had already gathered in the square where the neighbor was to be executed. And when the neighbor sees Miller coming with a note in his hand, he looks down at him with a sneer and says, "Miller, did you come to see me hanged?" And at that moment, Miller walks up to him and says, "No, I've come for something else," and hands him the signed petition for clemency, and then hands it to the officers who were there. When the neighbor saw that, he had tears in his eyes. He couldn't help it. He broke down and sobbed, and from then on it would be reported they were best friends. Why am I telling this story? It is possible, things that we do not understand, things that we, humanly speaking, would not understand and say, an enemy. It's a lot to ask when I greet him on the street, but that I help him, that I do so much for him. And Miller was committed. He really did put all his sweat into it in the truest sense of the word, so that this person would be set free, so that this person would not die. Friends, that's exactly what Jesus did for us. He did everything, and the Bible tells us that when we were still enemies, enemies of God, sinners, he went to the cross for us. And he loves those who hate him. He proved that on the cross. How often do we hear things about Jesus today, where people just talk about him without knowing what Jesus really felt and did for us? And it was significantly more than Miller felt and did for his neighbor. And for this reason, I would like to recommend this Jesus to us. He really loves you. He loves you more than you think. And he is able to change your heart so that what Miller did is not a foreign sphere for you, but that it becomes truth in your life too. God is able to accomplish anything in us. The question is whether we open the door and let him in. That is all God desires. God help us in this. Amen.